This is TWiT. Our first MacBreak Weekly of the new year. And Apple is no longer a $3 trillion company. Just like that, it happens. Only $2.945 trillion currently.
Did you guys sell off? Did you see the number and just sell off? Is this
big
your fault?
sell-off? Yeah,
exactly.
They hit it. Okay, that was my. I wonder. I bet you there are people who say, you know, they set limits, price to earning limits, and say, okay, as soon as it hits $3 trillion, I want to cash out. Is it meaningful in any other way? I mean, really?
Yeah. No, this is stock evaluation. This is the sum total of investor confidence in the company. So it's meaningful in that people seem to think that their roadmap is doing very well, but that doesn't mean that every decision they're going to make in the next 5 years is going to be a good one, or that the Apple that we know today is going to be the one that we know 2 years from now.
Yeah, and I mean it is valuable to the company,
share.
right? Because the price per share helps them acquire talent. Didn't they just say they're going to pay bonuses to employees that don't leave for Facebook?
Oh, they're rumored. They're rumored to be throwing a couple $100,000 around here and there.
Don't leave for Facebook, please.
There's a lot of well, Facebook does the same thing.
Yeah.
We know some people that get those bonuses. And so a lot of retention where companies will give key employees. I mean, 180,000 is I think what they were talking about. I've heard of much larger numbers handed to people with 4-year vesting. So, that hanging on to your key, in many companies, there is literally a handful. I mean, in a company as big as Apple, it's a couple hundred probably, that if you pulled any significant number out of them, things stop working. And but it's really not, everyone's important, but there are certain people that you got to make sure that you don't lose to maintain continuity between all the products. And so those are folks that oftentimes get stuff thrown at them.
It has some value, of course.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's really that connected between. I mean, it might be connected to Facebook hiring a bunch of their folks, but again, all of these companies have these incentive systems that they're using constantly. So the fact that it came out right now, I mean, and a lot of them come at the end of the year, just how they manage it. So it's not that uncommon. So I'm not sure how much of this is coincidental versus causal.
And I guess you could say if you were getting stock options, you'd rather the price were lower now and higher later. So this is of less value to people getting new grants than the people who got grants years ago.
Depends what the value of the stock options are, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of room to move.
Yeah.
And I wonder what Amazon does. Do you get your picture taken with Jeff Bezos if you don't leave? Disco Jeff Bezos.
Right.
Yeah,
so
did you
many
see
different
the pictures of him on New Year's Eve? He was
very different than Tim Cook.
He's having a good time.
He was styling.
He drove that little Honda for a long time, but I think he gave that up.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, enough of this.
He's living the life.
Living his pitbull life.
Now the door that he uses as an executive desk is actually off the front of the Vatican.
Yeah.
Still a door. Still has his humble
Andre is not happy about that.
grassroots roots.
Pitbull was the word that came to my mind as well. Rene Ritchie's living the pitbull.
Well, Telly Savalas, I thought, was a bit outdated for our crowd, Leo.
Yeah, Pitbull's right.
I think that what's interesting is that it's not Apple's stock price is not just their performance as a company from a technology perspective, but the financial performance of dividends, stock buybacks. I mean, so a lot of the reason people are putting money into it. There's some great graphs that came out along with the $3 trillion, which show. Apple has been steadily buying back, the availability of the stock. So a lot of what the value for each, but it just makes it a good place for people to put investment.
Buybacks increase value because they reduce the number of shares out there.
Yeah.
So your value per share goes up.
Right, but it doesn't increase. It increases more interest in doing it because each share goes up.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily by itself increase value because it's just you're just
the value is the value around. That hasn't changed. Yeah,
right.
And
But it means that
the company has
exactly
right. Investors are putting money in as a bank, and part of the reason they can do that is because of those buybacks, because of the dividends. There's significant returns, oftentimes better returns than they would get from a bank, and so definitely better returns than they're getting from a bank. And so it's just this, by doing that. So it's a mixture of Apple doing really well and a very interesting manipulation of their stock by buying back in dividends. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's that they are making sure that investors are getting their return on a regular basis.
They call him the Wizard of Omaha, Warren Buffett, whose equity portfolio is now 40% Apple. He bought in a 5% Apple stake for $36 billion 3 years ago. $36 billion is now worth $160 billion. That means he
Nice he has
made
a retirement fund at long last.
he made over 120 billion over the last 3 years. Not bad. Nice work if you can get it.
No.
As my stockbroker uncle always said, Leo, you need money to make money. And that doesn't include the $775 million in annual dividends. And you're right, Alex, that's a big part of the overall profile of Apple.
That's Super Bowl snack food at that level, Leo.
It was Philip Elmer DeWitt asked me foolishly to join a Slack call or a Zoom call with his subscribers who are all Apple investors a few months ago. And I felt like the worm in the cheese because I kept saying, and I know nothing. Apple's not going anywhere. Why would you buy Apple stock? But again, this is just investor confidence. This is not, it's meaningful to Apple in the ways we've described, but it doesn't mean necessarily that Apple's going to be great tomorrow. Although the wisdom of the crowds is probably fairly accurate here.
Well, and the greatest value for Apple for the stocks and investor confidence is, as you said before, it's employee retention and employee acquisition. When we talk about like, well, what does that what does that get us when they give back dividends, when they move their stock price up? Well, it affects a lot of employees that have stock. So it's really spreading the wealth out across that group. So when they buy that stuff back, they're actually putting money into their own employee stock as kind of an indirect bonus.
And as the aforementioned Philip Elmer DeWitt mentions in his PED 30 blog, Apple's service business alone is worth $1.5 trillion. He got this from an investor note to Wedbush clients. That Tim Cook said in early 2017, our goal is to double the size of the service business over the next 4 years. And I think you can say that his report card is A+ on that one. This is Wedbush's note, based on our supply chain checks over the last few weeks, we believe demand for the iPhone 13 is outstripping supply for Apple by roughly 12 million units in the last calendar quarter. Yeah. Supply chain issues ease, they think, by the first quarter of this year, or first half of this year, should make a big difference in Apple's sales. So another reason to be bullish on Apple's future. Hitting $3 trillion, they write, will be another watershed moment for Apple as the company continues to prove the doubters. Is he talking about me? To prove the doubters wrong.
No, it's the law of big numbers, people, Leo. He's going square for the law of big numbers.
The renaissance of growth story playing out in Cupertino. Services billion, which we believe to be $1.5 trillion. It worth to the market. Not to Apple, but worth to the market.
That's a great testimony to long-range planning for Apple. Years ago, the question amongst everybody would be, how long can Apple continue to thrive based on this enormous hit they've got on their hands called the iPhone? Today, had they not been thinking ahead, had they not been thinking beyond their current hit product, they would have been dealing with investors saying, well, great, now we got supply chain problems. Now you've got problems in investing in problems in having all of your manufacturing in one source on top of having supply chain problems. How that's going to choke off your ability to sell this one thing that's the biggest wedge of profit of income from on your annual report. Now what are you going to do? Now that wedge of iPhone sales gets smaller and smaller and smaller, not because sales are necessarily tapering off, but because they're making more and more and more money off of intangible things like services. And
isn't that a problem, though? Because isn't this what Wall Street loves? They love this idea of revenue per active user. They love this idea of quarterly results, constant income. They don't love the idea of putting that money towards long-term planning. So in a way, isn't this pushing Apple in the direction of short-term gains?
I think that Apple's kept them thinking about short-term gains by giving them dividends and stock buybacks. Yeah. So they basically, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and then they just do what they're going to do. So they're spending the money the way they want to. The stock market's happy because they're giving the money back directly and indirectly.
And you can't knock it. The estimate is that by 2024, services will be $100 billion plus
That's what
year.
Michael Dell asked for, right? He said, just give the money back to the shareholders. They said, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And as Tim Cook once said to a not similar investor query, it's like, if you're having problem, if you are upset with our executive decisions, you're welcome to sell your stock. You will find lots of buyers available for it. We think that
Right.
what the performance of our stock indicates that our decisions tend to work out for people in the long run.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.